that was like one of the few times I had gasped at the ending of a
Nice.
comic when
Cool.
they debut when they admitted who he was. That was so amazing story there. One of my favorites, and I agree. I think it still holds up, and I wish they would bring that to life in live action or animation someday because I've been wanting that since I was a kid, and I guess we'll get it
I got
someday.
my fingers crossed for X-Men '97. I get my
Me
fingers
too. Me
crossed that
too. Me too.
coming
So
up in
much
an
for X Men
upcoming series.
'97.
That would be great. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
What is up, geeks and geekettes? It is I, that guy Tommy, at the driver's seat here with this interview, and I am honored. I am privileged to be sitting with the one and only, cannot say enough good things about him, Mr. Mark Waid. And sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing. What kind of day has it been so far? I'm doing okay.
Awesome, awesome.
Good.
Well, I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were just off screen that I realized in researching you further, I'm actually a much bigger fan of your career than even I realized because when I was growing up, I watched like the X Men animated series and I watched the Batman animated series, and that was what got me back into comics. And at that time, my parents were just happy I was reading. They didn't care what it
Sure.
was. They
Exactly. Same
they
with me
wanted me to
growing up.
read.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they said, "You want to read comics? They're not too super violent. You can read comics." And honestly, one of the first things I ever got into was
Mhm.
the Onslaught saga in X Men.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay.
And I did not know until I researched that. I was like, he created Onslaught.
I was there
This
at
man
least
is yeah. So,
co-created. Yes, but
co-created.
yeah.
I'm giving you full credit. But yeah, so that was just wanted to say like that was one of the things that really did get me into comics. That whole
Cool.
storyline was just one of my favorite things I've read. I bought the omnibus about maybe 5-6 years ago because that's how big a fan of it I was.
It's a pretty good read. I mean, I'm not just
Yeah.
saying that because it's me. I'm saying because there's so many other writers and artists involved with it that
Mhm.
but it really, I looked at it again not too long ago. I think it holds up pretty well.
I tend to agree. So of course we're going to talk about your career, but since we that I was going to ask you about Onslaught later, but since we're already on that track, what was the process of coming up with that character? Because you're taking someone like an enemy the X Men had never really faced before, because it's like someone who really knows how to take them down. Because and one of his biggest feats when he debuted was immediately beating Juggernaut, like
Right.
that, which was unheard of. What was that process like coming up with him and introducing him and all that?
At that time, Scott Lobdell was writing one of the X-Men books. I was writing the other one. So I just come on board, and Scott had the name Onslaught in his head and the idea that it was some sort of unstoppable foe. But my memory is he didn't have much more than that. So there was no. It was very gelatinous in that sense. Um, and then we started talking about it and talking about like an actual onslaught on the X-Men, a physical onslaught on them and their school. And I remembered the origin of the Juggernaut, or the very first time we saw the Juggernaut in X-Men comics. It's a cool story if you go back and look at it.
Yeah.
It's not well drawn, but it's X-Men 12. It's way back in the day. And the whole conceit of the story that I love is that it starts with alarms blaring at Charles's school. Something's trying to breach its way in. And the entire story is Xavier telling you a little bit about Juggernaut. We haven't seen him, a little bit about the background, and then something else, another alarm goes off, and then a little bit more, and then something else happens, and he's coming, and we don't know. We have no idea what it looks like. We have no idea what it is, but it's coming. And the payoff at the end of the issue is, boom, here's Juggernaut.
Yeah.
And I wanted to I like that, and I kind of wanted to recreate that to some degree with Onslaught, which is why we just don't see him
Yeah.
in that first issue of X-Men where he meets Jean. It's just this creepy thing that is encroaching. And then from there, it was just, Scott and I, with the editors, just kind of knocked the idea back and forth. And I forget who did the design. I want to say it was Andy Kubert. It could have been Joe Madureira, but I want to say it was Andy Kubert.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. I can't remember because I did research that, and I did see both of their names, but I can't remember which one got the actual credit for creating him. Uh, but I do remember, especially the comic where we revealed who Onslaught was. I think as a kid, that was like one of the few times I had gasped at the ending of a
Nice.
comic
Cool.
when they admitted who he was. That was so amazing story there. One of my favorites, and I agree. I think it still holds up, and I wish they would bring that to life in live action or animation someday because I've been wanting that since I was a kid, and I guess we'll get it
I got
someday.
my fingers crossed for X-Men '97. I get my
Me
fingers
too. Me
crossed that
too. Me too.
coming
So
up in
much
an
for X Men
upcoming series.
'97.
That would be great. That would be
Yeah,
awesome.
there was some storylines that I know led to Onslaught, like because like they alluded to that happened in X-Men. They said this past season. In fact, I was like, please,
Yeah,
please,
fingers crossed. Yeah,
if it's not the next season, the season after.
right.
So before we get further into your career, because to be totally transparent, I love to write as well. I self
Yeah,
published a book,
cool.
and I really feel like stories like yours are reasons why I became a writer in the first place. Because I was like, man, I want to be able to do that and tell stories like that. Who were your inspirations when you started writing? What got you into this field?
When I started writing, I mean, I started writing late. I really had no ambition about being a comic book writer. I didn't think I could come up with that many ideas. It wasn't really until I was on staff as an editor at DC and I had all these scripts coming across my desk from every writer in the industry and learning so much as an editor by reading these scripts from Grant Morrison and from John Ostrander and from Neil Gaiman and from any number of people that I came away from that job with a sense of maybe I can. I mean, I can try anyway, and we'll see. But the real influences on me were names that no one on listening to this broadcast will know because they're old. But in the '70s, there was Steve Gerber, Steve Englehart, Jim Starlin, writers like that who were the first writers at Marvel who weren't writing deliberately like Stan Lee, who weren't trying to ape Stan's style.
Hmm.
And it was a real personal way of doing things. It really gave you a sense of who the characters were. It was very character driven
Hmm.
as opposed to plot driven. And then there's another writer who is an enormous influence on me. His name is Marty Pasco, and he wrote a bunch of stuff at DC in the late '70s, in the mid to late '70s. And he wrote one of my favorite Superman stories of all time. It's called The Life Story of Superman. It's an Action Comics 500, and it is basically Superman giving a tour through the Superman Museum to his friends and just talking about his life. And there's a part in there where he talks about when he was a kid, when he was a boy, a Superboy, when Crypto, the Superdog, showed up on Earth. And he talks about it in such sincerity and not making fun of the fact that it's a dog with superpowers. That's, I mean, that's low hanging fruit. You can make
Yeah,
fun of that stuff all you want, but if you're going to buy Superman, you got to buy into all of that stuff.
it's true.
And he's talking about what it meant to him as a kid to have his dog show up and not feel alone anymore because at that time he was the only person he knew who could do all these amazing things, right? He was so alone in the world, and he talked about how eh, great it was to finally have someone or someone at his side who could who knew what the wind felt like when it was rushing past your face as you were flying,
Right.
or knew the sound that bullets make when they bounce off living flesh. No one else in the world knows this stuff. And so that's that sentence, like the
Yeah.
sound that bullets make when they bounce off living flesh, was like now is part of my DNA because that influenced me majorly to think about, and I still do this when I think about these characters. I think about not just what their lives are like when they're punching stuff, but more like what are their lives like on a moment to moment basis when you have these incredible superpowers? What would your life be like if you were the Flash? And I'm not talking about the times you're fighting stuff. I'm not talking about the times you're doing superhero stuff. I'm just talking about when you're moving through the world on a regular basis,
Mhm.
and you're standing in line at the DMV and you're losing your mind because you're so used to things moving so quickly or what have you. Or, if you're Daredevil and you're blind but you have these enhanced senses, how do you perceive the world around you? Is there If I put you down in this spot, what will you see? If I put you down in this spot, I mean see, quote unquote, what will you perceive, right? What will your senses tell you about these? Think hard about that. There was Marty also wrote a Daredevil short story, a prose story, and same thing. He talked about, it was all talking about how Matt wakes up in the morning and he can tell by the smell of the air whether or not it's been raining outside. He can tell by the angle that the sun is hitting his skin, that and the warmth of it, what time of day it is. And it just that kind of stuff he's talking about. And so that again, that's the all those names, but certainly Marty was an enormous influence on how I think about what I do.
That's incredible, and you're right to think of it from not just the uh, I guess, punching bad guy standpoint, but from
Right.
the mental standpoint of the actual heroes and what they've been through,
Yeah.
and just who they are. Yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at it. I totally agree. How much? Well, I mean, clearly a lot of that, but how much of that went into the process of writing Superman Birthright?
Oh, everything. I mean,
Yeah.
everything. That was my perception of Superman, and your mileage may vary. Everybody has their different Superman, and they're not wrong unless you're Zack Snyder. Um, they're not wrong that Superman to me is a very lonely character. Superman to me is a very uh, unique, certainly early on in his career, before there was a Supergirl, before there were other Kryptonians around, he was the last son, and he could do things that nobody else could do. He could see things that nobody else could see, and you don't even have names for some of that stuff because nobody else can see them. Why are you even bothering? And so writing Superman from that perspective was the foundation of Birthright. And a big part of Birthright also was updating that origin for the 21st century. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but
Mhm.
telling the story of Superman in a post 9/11 world
Yeah.
was something I had to think about in terms of how people perceive a stranger flying around in the sky and
Mhm.
what you have to do to earn their trust in ways that maybe you didn't have to before 9/11. So all that stuff came into play.
Yeah. Wait, so I mean, and when you put it that way, that actually is like even a part of it I didn't even think about of considering Superman in that regard. So you're because especially because 9/11, I guess since I when by the time now I'm in my 30s, when it happened, I was a kid, so it's just part of my life
Right.
expectancy now. So how did you kind of like reconcile that in your mind with when you created Birthright, like knowing that's what you were trying to achieve with that?
I mean, it's there's certain things about Superman that transcend
Mhm.
generations. There's certain things about Superman that are fairly universal, and that's like he helps people. Obviously that he uses his powers for good. What I really was able to do was drill down on that, and not in a cynical way. I don't believe in. At the end of the day, I'm just fine with superheroes doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But if you need me to give you a concrete answer, then Birthright was a chance to really drill down on why Superman does what he does. Why does he wear a costume? Why doesn't he wear a mask? Why does he hide himself as Clark Kent? All of these questions that I approached it as if it were a brand new character that you've never seen before, and you were coming at it from a 21st century perspective of, okay, I'd like to understand who this character is.
That's amazing. Uh, yeah, I mean, and you did that, and I think beautifully, amazingly well
Thank you.
done. It's really great to see how that version of Superman still resonates with so many people, even though retcons, all this kind of stuff happened, but a lot of people still point to Superman Birthright as the Superman story. And and,
That's
and
flattering. Thank you.
and I was gonna say, how does that feel for you, knowing that that's a legacy that you have? Like some people say, maybe there are the Superman origin stories, but Birthright, that's the one. That's the one people
That
will
makes me
point to.
happier than anything else I've ever done in this industry. That
That's
that makes
awesome.
me that when people come up to me and just say, I didn't like Superman until I read this story, and now I get him. And then nothing makes me happier because it's my love letter to Superman. That whole story is my
Mhm.
love letter to Superman, and how much of a chance it is, what a gift it is to be able to give back to that character in a way that the character supported me and was really important to me as a kid.
That's amazing. I feel like your story and the cardboard speech he has in Justice League Unlimited really sum up like how he has to operate in the world. Like he can't go off. He can't lose his
Right,
control even for a second,
right,
because at the end of the day, he is still the single most powerful being on the entire planet.
right. He has to monitor 24/7 everything he does because anything if he loses concentration for just 1 second, you know, he picks something up and he accidentally throws it into the sun. I mean, you've got to be super careful that way. Um, I also really drilled down on Clark Kent. I really drilled
Yeah,
down on there's a very cynical sort of way of thinking that seems to pop up every now and then. Well, Superman doesn't lie, but he's pretending to be Clark Kent, isn't that? He's lying all the time. No, he's not lying. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy,
Yeah.
right? And if you are Superman, you if you were 20 if you were Superman 24/7, you would not have people be able to speak to you in a way that you and I talk to each other, right? In a way that makes you feel human, in a way that really makes you understand what ordinary people need and want. Because you're Tom Brady at the sports bar at that point,
Yeah.
if you're Superman 24/7, right? And you're not having regular conversations. Part of the purpose of Clark Kent is that is how Superman can talk to people
Yeah.
and live in this world and walk among us and form connections on a human level that Superman cannot make those same connections that we all crave. I mean, connection with other people and having a place and being a part of something is a universal need. And Clark Kent is a way of making sure that the barrier of being Superman is not there. Makes perfect sense to me. And I don't. Anytime somebody calls Clark Kent being Clark Kent a lie, my eye roll could power Los Angeles for a week.
Well, and I agree because I've always felt like there's a and good writers like yourself make this distinction, a difference between when you have the identity of Clark Kent Superman as opposed to Bruce Wayne and Batman, which they have their differences for almost the same reasons, but there's different levels to it, and I really and that's just, and
Right.
I have the same kind of eye roll when people have like kind of like very disparaging works about like Batman's character. I'm like, yeah, you read All Star Batman once, and that was your whole basis of Batman from now on. You kind of got to read the other
Right.
stories to get them. But that and the same thing, and the
Right.
Superman's the same way. It's like if you only read certain stories and you form your whole basis, but this guy has a whole mythos at this point, you know.
Right. Well, I can get to everybody is that way. Every character.
Yeah,
If you read certain crappy Spider-Man stories, that's your vision of Spider-Man. You've read the wrong stuff.
yeah. So I want to transition real quick because we have it as our background, and I do want to ask this before I get started. Do you ever get tired of Kingdom Come questions? Because that's one of my favorite stories of all time. I got to be honest with
No,
you.
I don't. I mean, I that's fine. I really there will be a point in my career at some point where I will just start carrying around a sign that says "Don't ask me about Kingdom Come," but that's fine. The fact that it still evokes questions means it still means something to people. And again, what a gift to me to be able to give something like that is memorable to so many people. It's look, most people don't get a chance like that, and I'm grateful.
That's awesome. Well, I'll give you this real quick backstory with me. With me, my history with the comic was I actually didn't even read it as a kid because my dad saw it because he likes comics too. He bought
Mhm.
the initial 4 issues when they debuted and put them in plastic, and I wasn't allowed to read them.
Oh,
So I didn't
oh,
actually get to read them. So I was like in my teens when the trade paperback came out. That's when I read it because my dad would not let me open those.
I have words for your dad, but okay. I would like to
Yeah.
put me in touch with your dad. But all that said, I appreciate the fact that finally you got a chance to crack the trade.
Yeah. I read it and I've told this to pretty much anyone who asked me. It's probably one of the comic stories I've read the most.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you.
like I've probably read backwards and forwards, and I find new stuff, little things like, oh, I didn't notice that last time, probably 100 times. So what was your process going into that, especially with it being inspired by the Book of Revelations? You had, of course, a preacher as the main character with the Spectre, not even possessed by the Spectre, which normally a character would go and he would just be the Spectre. He wouldn't
Right.
be the Spectre's physical guide. What was that process like?
That process was, I mean, to be fair, and I've said this many times, the basic idea, the very basic core idea was Alex's that he brought to DC and looking for
Hmm.
a writer. The idea that it's sometime in the future, a bunch of new heroes are on the scene, Superman has retired for whatever reason. Alex didn't really have that locked in yet. And then Superman comes back and there's young versus old. And that's the heart of it that Alex brought to the table. And then it was a matter of the two of us fleshing that out and turning into a plot. The reason that the minister is the point of view character, and I think most people know this by now, but I'll say it again, is that's Alex's dad. That's literally Alex's dad. Dad, that is what his dad looks like. That is his dad's name, Norman.
Hmm.
And we it was very important for Alex to be able to do that in honor of his dad, who's still alive. I mean, it wasn't like a,
Yeah.
post-mortem thing. Um, so that's the stuff that came to the table. Then it was a matter of us sitting down and cracking the story and trying to figure out, to me, the hardest thing was trying to figure out why Superman would retire in the first place.
Mhm.
Really, I had a hard time with this notion that Superman would make such a big mistake that he would force himself into exile. I just don't think Superman doesn't work for me if he's screwing up.
Yeah.
Um, it's so we really drilled down on what could possibly make Superman be willing to give up. And ultimately, it was his humility, I think. It was the idea that Metropolis had decided that they prefer heroes who do kill
Yeah.
over heroes who don't kill. And Superman said, well, then I don't know what my place here is. It's not petulant. It's just, I don't know what my place here is.
Yeah.
And the thing about the humility, the part of the humility comes in is that Superman doesn't understand that he is Superman. Like, he doesn't think of himself in such grandiose terms that he realizes that if he retires, then the Green Lanterns and the Hawkmans and the Robins of the world are like, well, if you're going to retire, why do I even get out of bed? Like,
Yeah.
what? And so that is the unintended consequence of Superman retiring, is that just made everybody else cynical, and it made all his his friends and his compatriots, well, why do we even bother?
And
So then
that
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 was the hardest part of the story to crack.
yeah. And again, as a fan of it, I think you did it in one of the best ways possible because
Thank you.
actually, you kind of answered this question already. I was going to ask you, what was it like to craft like that's Superman, because a lot of people have done a dark version of Superman. You know, you have
Right.
the Injustice games, you have like the Injustice League or the Crime Syndicate, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But yours wasn't necessarily. He wasn't an evil Superman. He was just Superman
No.
that he's just like, I can't do this anymore. Is essentially what he said, and in
Right.
a logical way. He just said, I just can't do this anymore.
I just can't do that. I don't know who I'm doing this for.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, evil Superman is such an easy thing to write, and it's just if I never see evil Superman again as long as I live, I'll be happy, because it's just. I mean, yes, we did Irredeemable. I did Irredeemable, 15 years ago or whatever, which was, what if Superman snapped and turned evil? But that was the first 4 issues. The other 37 issues was, okay, why? Let's just do some really deep diving into the psychology
Mhm.
of why someone with that would do that, as opposed to just issue after issue after issue of just Superman sticking his hand through people's chests.
Yeah.
It's I think writing evil Superman is low hanging fruit, because anyone can write that story. Anyone can write the story of what if Superman went crazy and that's all you wrote. Anybody can, and you never want, as a writer, you don't want to tell a story that the audience can tell
Mhm.
without your help.
Yeah. And that's why I think Kingdom Come really does stand apart, because it wasn't like you said, it wasn't an evil Superman. It was just when he said, where's my place in the world? And even when he comes back, he's still not sure if this is where he belongs.
Right.
And and you guys did something. You and Alex did something really I thought was really cool in the comic, and that I actually did not see coming. Is when he actually does confront Magog later on in the comic, after the nuclear explosion and everything. They don't really fight.
No.
He mainly talks him down, because even Magog is now kind of where Superman was, in that same place. Like, I caused this. I don't know where I belong. I did this.
Right.
Like, how did that decision come about? Because in any other comic they would just fight, and that would be kind of like the end. But in this one,
I
you guys did something way different.
I think the first thing I ask myself when I write a scene is, have I seen this before? And if I have, I will move heaven and earth to get away from it. I don't always succeed, but I will move heaven and earth to get away from it. And look, here's the thing. If you remember that scene, and you remember that scene because it was a highly emotionally charged
Yes.
moment, right?
Hmm.
If it had been just a big fight scene, you wouldn't remember it. I mean, because it'd be
Yeah.
like a million other fight scenes you've ever seen. Um,
Yeah.
I think people remember the details of that scene even better than they remember the details of, the big battle at the end of issue 3 and the start of issue 4,
Yeah.
because it's emotionally resonant in that moment. So that's the only thing I really care about, right? And frankly, I will do backflips to avoid another standard fight scene between people, because I've seen it all, and I'd rather be something heavily emotional.
Yeah. I like you said, I do remember. I was like, as you were talking, I remember like just panel after panel, almost like in just like when Superman tells him you must be so, because like Magog's like, this is the world I represent, and Superman says you must be so proud. And it was one of the few times, because again, as a growing up, I finally read it. I was like, he just says, "God damn you!" and he shoots the blaze. I was like, oh, and I thought that's when the fight started. So I turned the page like,
Yeah.
they're not fighting.
Nope. Nope. Superman will not raise a fist unless he
This
absolutely
is true.
has to.
Yeah,
He just because there's no point, because he's going to win. So there's
yeah,
no point in raising a fist unless you absolutely have no other choice.
yeah. And you mentioned the end of it. And even then, that ending fight to me was like, it felt like there was no real supervillain in Kingdom Come, which I thought was also made it just so brilliant. It was just, they were more like just arguing over the condition of the world at the current time.
Right. There was no one single villain pulling all the strings.
Right. Yeah, it was, but the fight with him and Shazam and how that ended was basically he felt like Superman again. Like he talked him down.
Yeah.
It's like this is what has to
Yeah.
happen. I feel like that was like I said, I can go on forever about Kingdom Come. That whole ending was just one of my favorites
Thank you.
in comics ever. And I'm probably going to tell you that to your face, which means a lot. I forgot to mention this. I actually did get to meet you last year at GalaxyCon in Austin.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. Okay.
I didn't
That was a
get
good
to.
show, by the way.
That was a great show. I didn't have anything for you to sign. I just wanted to shake your hand, and you were so gracious about that. I really appreciate that.
My
Thank you for
pleasure.
that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and actually, there's the picture right there.
Ah, there
So
we are, right there.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That picture is one of my favorites. When people ask me who's that, I almost like, you don't know who Mark Waid is. And I'm like, well, of course I don't know who Mark Waid is. I'm the nerd here who knows who this guy is. So you have this illustrious career, and I meant to say this at the top. You have so many credits to your name that we do not have enough time to go through all of them. And now, even going forward, there's you got the new Superman movie coming out with James Gunn at the helm, and there, of course there's rumors that, of course, no one knows for sure, but there's rumors that Birthright's gonna, like, the elements of Birthright will be implemented into the story. How does it feel that, like you mentioned it, but like not just with the fans, but now in even other media, Birthright still exists, no matter
That's
what.
really cool. That is
Yeah,
really cool. I gotta say, the fact that the S stands for hope, the fact that
yeah,
that is something that now is part of pop culture makes me unbelievably happy.
yeah,
It just, we all feel that way when we're doing our turns with the characters, when we're we're taking turns with these characters as writers, as creators, knowing that we don't own them, knowing that we got to give them back to the company at some point. And you hope that in writing this character for whatever length of time, that you can do something that will stick and be carried on for them. And most of the time it doesn't happen. Most of the time, the next person in line is just interested in trying to put their own stamp on it, which is fine. But on those rare occasions when you're able to add something to the character's mythos that continues, that and people continue to reference Penn, it is just such a good feeling, because it meant it's like I left a thumbprint there and it feels good.
yeah. I do remember also when Brandon Routh, who played Superman Returns, when he was Clark Kent again for the Arrowverse CW's Crisis of Infinite Earth storyline. I was one of the few people who lost my mind when we saw we were getting the Kingdom Come variant of that, and me having to explain to my wife, my parents, my sisters and
Right.
brothers, like, it's like, well, why is this suit black? It's like, how do you guys not know this? And just like going off about that. Did you was that special for you as well, knowing that that was the version he got to be?
So it was so cool. And I knew about it a long time ahead of time.
Uh,
Mark Guggenheim, who was a producer and writer of those shows, is a good friend of mine. And we were out to dinner. As, they hadn't even started shooting yet. And he said, I got to show you something. And he showed me the costume sketch. And I was over the moon. I was just so excited about this, that this would, and so he did the Kingdom Come Superman. Ralph did. He did a great job with it, I think.
Yeah, he did.
He's he's a great Superman. I mean, is the tragedy of him being a great Superman in a terrible Superman movie
Yeah.
is really a crime. I mean, I always felt bad for him when I saw like Tyler Hoechlin show up on the Supergirl show as Superman. Well, he's fine. He's a fine
Yeah.
Superman. But you're looking at that going, oh, for the love of God,
Yeah.
it should be Brandon Routh. But because the movie tanked, and it wasn't his fault because the movie tanked, he was the last person on the Warner Brothers list
Yeah.
who would ever get that job again. I would be on the list further up than he would be.
Yeah.
So to see that he finally got to stay in the suit, be Superman, and be a good Superman in a
Yeah.
good story.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with him, and we exchanged some brief correspondence around that time, and he was so cool.
Yeah. I was one of the same people who I didn't hate Superman Returns, but I saw everyone's logic in not liking it. But my problem,
I enjoyed it, but I saw everybody's logic. I totally get it. Yeah.
And so, but I said the same thing you just said. It's like, but it wasn't Brandon Routh's fault. He wasn't the problem in the movie.
No, he was the best thing about the movie.
He was the best.
Yes,
Yeah. He was the best thing about the movie. So when I heard they were doing, and one of my biggest things with Crisis of Infinite Earth, especially when we started getting the multiverse and everything, and Brandon Routh is already the Atom, I was like saying, please let him be Superman again. Please let him be Superman again. Please let him be Superman again. And then when we did, and then we got the Kingdom Come version, I was like, all my prayers were answered. I'm good. To me, I was like, the rest of this 5-parter can suck. If they get that right, I'm good.
That's all I care.
The fact that the whole story was also good was just icing on the cake. Another part of your career that I had no idea you had an influence on for me until I learned about it was you also had hands in writing for Exo Man of War and Solar Man of the Atom. And for those people who have no idea who those characters are, they were part of several companies, Acclaim, Valiant, and everything. And the reason I know those comics was when I was a kid, and any comic was like 99 cents or lower, that was an instant yes from my mother. So they used to sell them at this grocery store by my house. And my mom said, how much are they? 99 cents? Yes, you can have those. And
sold. Okay.
Yeah, that's how I got into those. So is there a difference really when you're writing for big companies in terms of like smaller companies like that, or is it the same amount of effort going in? Yeah, always.
It's the same thing. It's the same. You just start from the inside out with characters. That you know the characters, figure them out, and then build a story around that. Same process.
Same process. Okay. Awesome. So you've done so much in your career. Like I said, we don't have there's no one has that much time to cover everything. Do you have anything else coming up, or is there anything that you want to do that you haven't done yet? Is there anything like that?
There's things that I want to do that I have done that you don't know about yet.
Okay,
that excite me. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't more Superman work in my future. And of course, I'm still doing Superman, Batman, World's Finest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Absolute Power, which is the big DC crossover that's coming out this summer. First issue came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I'm so excited for that.
Thank you. I'm really happy with the way it's
so
coming out.
Excited for that.
Mora, who's drawing it, is so amazing.
Yes. The previews, everything I've seen, that made me so happy. I'm like, yes, just give me this.
It's holding together pretty well. I'm really happy with the way it's holding together, and all the tie-ins are supporting the main book in a way that doesn't feel like a cash grab. Like all the tie-ins have a specific purpose. And then beyond that, I guess, yes, I want to tell you, but there's stuff that we're like 3 or 4 weeks away from announcing, but there's at least 2 more ongoing DC series on the other side of Absolute. No, 3 ongoing DC series on the other side of Absolute Power that I'll have something to do with, because who needs sleep? I get to play at DC.
I mean, hey, sleep. I don't know what that is. I see it every now and again, but it doesn't last long. But well, I think I can speak on behalf of so many fans, especially of things like Kingdom Come, Onslaught, Birthright, and on behalf of all of us, we just say thank you, because
you're very kind. Well, thank you for everybody for reading this stuff, for continuing to read this stuff. I'm very, very lucky and very fortunate, and I'm very grateful of the fact that I've had the kind of career I've had, where I've always had something on this. There's not been what was it? It was during the pandemic. I realized it was when when Marvel stopped publishing comics for a little
Mhm.
while during the pandemic, and I remembered thinking at one point, "Oh my God, this is the first time in like 35 years that a month has gone by and I don't have a comic book out there somewhere. That's really weird." So I get, this is not a humble brag. I mean, this is a genuine expression of gratitude that I'm just 39 years of doing this and I'm still able to do it. I'm very happy.
Wow. And believe you me, I don't care if I sound like a fanboy or whatever. I hope you keep doing it because I
I'm
think whenever you
I'm
come
going nowhere,
something,
dude.
yeah, awesome, and that makes me thrilled to hear.
Cool.
Uh, you got so much coming out, and we can't wait for it. Us fans, we are just chomping at the bit for it. And I
Yes,
cannot thank you enough for your time today. Cannot thank you enough
of course.
for you speaking with us for Countdown City Geekcast. We are thrilled, and we hope to have you back someday in the future to talk more about future projects. Maybe after Absolute Power and all the other stuff comes out, we can have you back and discuss all those things. If we'll see.
But I can't talk about it right now. You bet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, I mean, I mean, when you said that, I'm like, no, say it. But no, I get it. You can't say
I know.
it.
If only I could. All right. Well, then, then this was a lot of fun. Thank you. Good questions, and I enjoyed my
I
time here. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. And to
All
all you guys, Cat City Geeks, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you in the future. Peace.
right.